I don't think you're missing anything there, John. As a matter of fact, let me be clear on a couple of things. One is some Republicans supported it back in 2004. It's true, one of those, the principal proponent was in fact the Speaker of the House, and I've frankly found that unfortunate. But there were many of us who said, no, this distorts the marketplace. This, in fact, drives up energy costs. This puts systems in place that are not economically viable on their own. One other point, just so you know where I sit as to where I stand, or what, somebody talks about that somewhere. Anyway, I myself, my home is run on solar and wind power.
Really?
Exclusively.
What are you, some freak hippie?
There we go.
I used to respect you. So you do that when you're out tie-dyeing?
Yeah, something like that. Here's the point. I believe renewables are good things, which I am a real fan of, but not when the government steps in and mandates and subsidizes.
Why do you do it at your home? I'm curious.
Because I'm fascinated with it. I've just been interested in it all my life, and when my wife and I could finally build our own home back in the early 90s, we started planning it that way, and by the mid-90s, we had this thing up and running. And it's been running ever since. And, when I go home tonight, I'll check out the battery panel, make sure everything's okay,
so it's solar and wind power.
Yeah, it's primarily solar, because wind really isn't that consistent, and even at the large scale, they always have to have a backup system.
All right, Mr.
for
Free Market guy. So I must ask you, when you bought all these new toys, did you take any of these subsidies that were offered with it?
Actually, there were no subsidies offered for it.
Really?
That's correct. If you want another program on how the Colorado Electric Board was really a problem and an impediment towards, just a guy doing it on his own, I'll tell you that too. But honestly, I did it because I like to do it. Some people, maybe they get a big power boat or something like that. I knew it wasn't cost effective, but I've always been intrigued by it, and I do think it has an important role in the future. But it'll work the best when people learn how to do it within the economic realities.
And let me jump on that. I believe that wind power, for instance, is getting technologically better and better all the time. I'm impressed by that. The early ones were worse. They get better. That's terrific. Let them swim or sink on their own. Why go into the marketplace and say, listen, Rural Electric or this electric company, you're going to produce your product this way. You don't go to Hostess and tell them how to make their Twinkies. You don't go to a furniture store and say, here, you're going to make your furniture this way. Why are you telling these guys?
Well, so I think it's important for us to look at what is the actual role of state government in incentivizing and supporting businesses to be successful. And we've had this debate on the Senate floor 2 weeks ago. There are currently $2.2 billion the state of Colorado currently invests in tax exemptions for businesses, because we believe those are important to help them be successful for the kind of things they do in Colorado, like create jobs and economic growth. And the difference is those incentives are not bridge subsidies, right? Those are not subsidies that we think a market is going to improve and get more efficient and grow out of. The $700 million manufacturing tax exemption we have, that's been on the books for 50 years, and it's not going anywhere. We're not waiting for manufacturing to become efficient enough that we can remove that exemption. People will fight tooth and nail to do that. We currently subsidize fossil fuels at the federal level and the state level tremendously. There's currently an exemption actually for a manufacturing exemption specifically for people that buy manufacturing products for the purpose of generating electricity. That means coal plants all over the state right now are taking subsidies from the state of Colorado with no long-term plan to reduce their costs and grow out of this.
Will you agree with me, though?
The solar and the wind, to finish to your point exactly, those costs have been cut by 30%. And what we are talking about here is bridging a startup market the same way we did with biotech and others in a way that once they get to proficiency, once they get much more viable, they'll need less of those.
What I'm hearing is two wrongs make a right, number one. The other thing is, let me say, you can say that these traditional forms of energy are subsidized. And by the way, if they are, let's end those subsidies. I will join you in ending subsidies for all energy companies. But when you look at them per kilowatt, per megawatt, per output, the amount of subsidy that goes to coal-fired power plants or other forms is minuscule compared to the immense amount of subsidy, particularly for solar. So instead of doing the two wrongs make a right, how about you and I join hands and we say no more tax subsidies, no more corporate welfare for any energy energy company. That we will not mandate how it's done, nor will we say, here is your tax benefit for doing that. Would you join me in that?
I actually wouldn't, because I don't see it as two wrongs make a right. I actually see it as two rights make a right. I think some of those tax incentives are valuable and important investments for the state of Colorado. I know a lot of the Republicans do. That's why we didn't propose, and no one would have supported removing the manufacturing tax exemption. Almost all other states have it. That would make Colorado at a real competitive disadvantage to the neighboring states. But you're talking about here the opportunity to be able to invest in a sector that's going to grow up to 23,000 jobs in this state. That's going to be able to
cost any jobs?
I don't believe that it is.
Increased energy costs will not cost any jobs?
Well, as you know, the increased cost here is capped at 2% total. That's what the cap is. You may know this last year already. Rates got hiked 6% to all utility payers, to all rate payers under Excel for the building of the new Comanche plant, which is a coal plant in South Denver.
I want to get this on tape and on record.
3 times.
Are you telling me
price.
that increasing energy costs because of renewable mandates won't cost any jobs or push any manufacturing out of this country, out of this state, or even this country?
I don't know the answer to that question. That's predicting the future. I think what we do know is that.
But you're just predicting the future. We're going to have all these jobs. We're going to do this.
That's because we know going from 5,000 homes to 100,000 homes with distributed generation solar, like that on Senator Lundberg's house, is going to create real jobs and is going to help avoid the distribution and transmission problems we have with large
jobs
solar.
that could be used for more productive means in the society.
Yeah, and let me actually get to Senator Johnston was talking about all of these jobs created in putting this distributed energy system, that means solar panels on homes. In the bill, it requires that you hire a certified installer, and that's a lot of the jobs. These certified installers, now had that been a requirement on me, I wouldn't have put solar on my house because I wouldn't have been able to afford it. I could afford the equipment, but I did it myself. This bill says if you're going to work under our program, you're going to go hire somebody. And if you're, a homeowner wanting to do it yourself, sure, you're going to have to do it with all the, with all the inspections and all of the UL approvals and the electrical code. But above and beyond, you've got to hire somebody. So those are some of those jobs that actually, it's the bulk of the jobs that I really saw in the bill.
One of the best stories that never got covered was when President Obama came to Colorado, to Denver, to sign into law the stimulus package, and he went tap dancing on the top of the museum up there and looked at those beautiful solar panels and said, this is the way we're supposed to go. Little did he know that a few years ago, when those solar panels were brought up to the board that would say whether we do it or not, they voted overwhelmingly, no, we can't do it. Why? Because the payback time for the savings was going to take them 103 years. Only when they came back with, well, we can get all these subsidies to do it, then they did it. When it comes to putting these things on their own, the savings right now doesn't make them practical, does it? They don't exist without this corporate welfare.
I think the folks like Senator Lundberg are an indication that that's not the case. There are folks that are doing that and have continued to do it.
So we don't need the corporate welfare?
No, you're saying that is it not sustainable without it? Will people not choose to make those decisions? I think what you have is there will be some folks who can afford to put $15,000 solar installation on their roof and will do it without incentives, and it will pay back over a long period of time. And I believe that part of this argument is about externalities, right? So part of it is about what are the additional costs that renewables versus fossil fuels have on society at large. I think that's a fair question. But I think that the point is...
I want to focus on corporate welfare.
Yeah.
And I noticed that when Exxon gets some sort of tax break, that's corporate welfare. When we spend $5 million to incentivize Vestas to come here to make more new energy economy, we don't call that corporate welfare. Can we call it what it is? This mandate is corporate welfare. There are companies who would not make it otherwise. This is their money.
I mean, yeah, I don't see it that way, and I see it the way that they are investments that the state chooses to make for things that we think have valuable outcomes, the same way that we do for the other $2.2 billion of exemptions we give to businesses. You may disagree with all of them, and I respect that principled opinion. Most of the Republicans in our chamber won't. They actually fight to keep all of them, and I think a lot of them are valuable. I think attracting and retaining and growing business is a real benefit. When we talk about the externalities, those incentives go to create jobs that support families, that support communities, that support business, and that's a positive outcome.